So, our next guest gave me some wonderful parenting tips for my grandbabies. And so, I think you'll learn a lot from her. And so, let's see what she has to share.
Building spirituality, family, health, and business. This is the Giant Builders with Lois Wyant.
Hi, Giant Builders. Welcome. I hope you're having an amazing day. And I am because today we have Adriane Thompson here. Hi, Adriane. How are you?
I am so good. How are you?
All right. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Hi, yeah. So my name is Adriane and I live in Surprise, Arizona. I am a certified parent coach. I had been working for an education company where we were trying to change education and turn school into a more personalized, self-paced, rooted in neurodevelopmental models of how you treat kids versus behaviorism, which a lot of schools are rooted in. And we helped people start and run micro schools. And so I had already been doing some parent coaching, working with the educators, hosting workshops, and had a podcast. And the podcast still running, even though I'm not with the company. It's called Kindled. And so then when I left the company in September, I decided to start my own business. And it's my business is called Raising Kids with Purpose. I have a blog called Raising Kids with Purpose. I started it in about 2018. When I went to the education company, I didn't write anything, was I kind of was dormant on the blog, but I had a ton of really awesome printables and free resources. And so you can go to the blog and there's lots of, I like creating printables and resources for parents that they can use with their kids. So they're pretty and colorful and, things that they can fill out and help build a strong relationship with their kids. And so because of that, I already had a community. I had been communicating with people, but it was just a passion. It wasn't a business at the time, just kind of like what you said you're doing here. And then in January, I just went all in. I filed for an LLC and I just finished my 12-week program where I take parents through this transformational program of if they're really struggling with their kids' behaviors or struggling with being reactive or they're just not liking being a parent because it just feels really, really hard. So I take them through this process and I'm working with a couple families. I had my first family graduate last week. So that was super exciting. And yeah, so I work with families just to help them find joy in parenting and learn practical tools and skills on what their kids' brains and their nervous systems need in order to grow in a healthy, emotional, and psychological way.
Wow. This sounds like a really hard job.
I love it. I'm super passionate about it. I myself have neurodivergent kids, and sometimes with neurodivergent kids come with really big behaviors. So one of my sons in particular has huge sensory meltdowns where he's not in control. He's 13 now, so we've come a long way. And because of that, I've lived with the hardest behaviors. So I feel like even though yes, I'm certified, but living through it makes me more, of an expert. And if these tools and skills work for the most vulnerable nervous systems, they really work for all kids.
Oh, that's great. So in your notes, it says that behavior is communication. Can you expand on that for me?
Yeah, so a lot of times, especially in the American culture, we see behavior as something to what? What do you think? Like when we see kids behaving a certain way as an adult, or if you went through traditional school, like what typically
They're
do we
acting
want to
out.
do with behavior?
They're acting out. They're being disobedient.
Right. And what does the adult want to do in those moments?
Oh, well, it depends on how they were parented.
Right.
Yeah.
But typically the go-to is to stop it.
Hmm.
And the way schools are built is to have it's rooted in compliance. And again, depending on how the adult was raised. I would say typically it was about compliance, and you use the word disobedient. So we see this behavior as being disobedient, and that then we could dive deeper into that and think the behavior is wrong and something we need to correct. So, what I do, and it's not just me, I'm learning from all these books behind me. I'm learning from some really, really amazing interpersonal neurobiologists like Dr. Dan Siegel and Dr. Tina Payne Bryson and Dr. Mona Delahook. And so learning, and Dr. Ross Green, who wrote Raising Human Beings, and seeing, not only just in the research, but then with the kids that I work with and all the kids that I came in contact with when I was working at the education company. And so I help parents see behavior is not something they need to stop, but rather, okay, what is this behavior communicating right now? You have a 4-year-old and he's screaming and yelling because he wants the blue cup instead of the red cup. And, traditionally we've been taught we need to stop that behavior right now. And sometimes either we become very permissive by just giving the cup that he wanted, and giving in, or we yell, send him to his room. He has to go time out. If we can step back and go, okay, what is he communicating right now? He's communicating that he needs autonomy. He needs to be in control over what bowl he gets, not letting you choose that bowl. 4-year-olds especially need a lot of control in their life. And unfortunately, because they're 4, we can't give them as much control that they want. So that's what I mean by behavior is communication. It's typically an unmet need or a lagging skill. They just don't have the skill to regulate right now. I don't even like the word tantrum because of the negative connotation that goes along with it. It's as if, again, it's something that they're doing wrong. No, let's look at what it's communicating, what that tantrum or big emotions are communicating is a lack of the ability to be able to emotionally regulate. And we know that the frontal lobe, which is control of that, the emotional regulation down to like that downstairs brain, I have my brain behind me. I'll probably pull it out here at one point or another. Uh, we know that it takes 25 to 28 years to fully develop. So whenever we are expecting a 3, 4, or 5-year-old to not freak out when they got the red cup instead of the blue cup, then that isn't serving them because we're not understanding that they're actually communicating that they don't have the skill to be able to regulate in that moment.
Well, my husband's 73 and he still throws tantrums, and I would call them tantrums. So,
Well, honestly, a lot, especially adults, did not, their brains did not have a chance to fully develop. So a lot of adults, if they weren't parented in this neurodevelopmental way and they were parented in a behavioristic way and emotions weren't allowed, especially with boys, you got to toughen up, you got to suck it up, stop crying. All of those things made it so that possibly your husband's frontal lobe didn't get to fully develop. And so he wasn't able to build those neural connections that help him regulate his emotions.
no, so maybe I could learn something from for him. So, all right. So, how does understanding the brain help us be better parents?
We can understand that. I'm going to pull out my brain.
Okay.
I have a physical brain for those of you listening. I'm not pulling out my actual brain from my head. So by understanding, so this is the downstairs brain here. There you got the cerebellum. We have the amygdala here. This part is the limbic system, and it is the most developed when a child is born because this is what controls our breathing, our heart rate, our heart being able to pump blood throughout our body, and just, the basics. And this is also where emotions are. Babies cry because they need to be able to communicate. Again, behavior is communication. And when a baby cries, what are they communicating? That they need their mama, they need a caregiver, they're hungry, they're tired. So it's the same thing as whenever, a 5-year-old is crying. What do they need in this moment? So understanding that the brain is very, very, very under construction until, like I said, age Frontal lobe, they're saying about age 25 to 28 that fully develops, looking at the activity in the brain on functional MRIs. Then I had read once, and I need to dive into this a little bit more, that the emotional centers of the brain don't develop until closer to early 30s, which made so much sense to me. I'm like, that's why I cried all the time in my 20s. I thought my brain was fully developed by then. And then I was able to keep it together so much better. My cognitive flexibility was way better in my 30s. And so, anyways, by understanding, first of all, that the brain's under construction, that could really serve you in your relationship with your child and your relationship with anyone. Like understanding, oh, okay, maybe his frontal lobe didn't fully develop. So then you can, like, that helps calm your own nervous system to not react back and not allow other people's amygdala, that's our instant response, to hijack ours, because that happens too. And then understanding that in order for our brain to fully develop in a healthy way, and those neural connections, those stairways for, that Dr. Dan Siegel talks about it as if this is the upstairs brain and the downstairs brain, and you want to build stairways to get up to there. Sometimes he says that there's a baby gate that slams shut. That's whenever we see meltdowns and tantrums and big behaviors, is the connections to the frontal lobe are completely shut off. So then he gives lots of tools, and lots of, people in the parenting space now understand, okay, by putting a child in timeout or yelling at them is just keeping that baby gate slammed shut. That's not how we build connections up to the frontal lobe. The way we build connections up to the frontal lobe is through connecting right brain to right brain. That's emotions. That is your nonverbal more so than your verbal. That's hard for me because right before I came on here, my husband's like, well, you have the gift of gab. You'll be fine. Going on the podcast. So sometimes I have to like hold my mouth shut and just pay attention to my body language, and calming body language, get down below eye level. You want to connect right brain to right brain first. Then we can move to logic. A lot of adults go right to logic. We want to stop the behavior. We want compliance. And what we know about brain science now and how the brain develops is that's not helping create those neural connections up to the frontal lobe. And that's what we want, because that's when a child can regulate his or her anger, be aware of how they feel in their bodies. I work with families, and so many parents, when I ask them where they feel it in their bodies, have no idea. What do you mean I feel it in my body? They're so disconnected to their body, to their spirit, to their sense of identity, because they didn't get these things as a child.
All right, so give me an example here. Okay, so all right, last week my 1-year-old and 3-year-old grandsons were together, and the 3-year-old hit the 1-year-old on the head with a toy. Okay, I mean, my automatic response is to take it away from him and say, no, you don't do that. Is there
Mhm.
stuff, what is your direction?
Okay, so if we take the toy away and tell them not to do that, are we connecting emotional right brain to right brain? Or where do we go? Are we going to logic?
No, because his first thing was, why'd you do that? So he had no comprehension as to why the toy was being taken away, which I
Right.
recognized that right away, but I didn't know what to do.
Right. So you went straight to logic, right? So what we can do instead is, you still want to take the toy away because it's safety is number one. If another child's getting hurt, we attune to that child first, and then the kid that did the hitting, then we get to him second. We want to make sure that the child that got hurt feels safe and seen and heard. Also, though, did you say 3-year-old is the one that hit the 1-year-old? So the 3-year-old also needs to feel seen, heard, and understood in that moment, because 3-year-olds are acting out of the subconscious brain. I would be curious, okay, under the lens of behaviorist communication, what do you think he was communicating when he hit the 1-year-old?
Well, the sword was like a little or the toy was like a little plastic sword. So I don't know if that was like a hero type thing, or I mean, that would be my first instinct, but I don't know for sure.
So imagination or imaginative play versus he wasn't like frustrated or angry. He was just playing, you think?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So if he's just playing and he's becoming, a character and he hits the 1 year old, not, he doesn't have the cognitive skills. So we're talking lagging skills too. That's what we're communicating. He doesn't realize, oh, if I hit my brother, it's going to hurt him, or I might, be corrected. He doesn't have any of those cognitive skills. He's playing. Play is the language of that age. So then you take the sword away and you tell him not to do that. Do you see why he's like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Right? So that's where we want to look at first is why did this happen? What is beneath the surface? And then it once we can connect right brain to right brain, then that's the opportunity you have to be able to teach. So we don't want to start with logic and start with teaching right away. Like, don't do that. Also, for a 3 year old, it's really hard to get a direction of don't do something because that means they have to double think. They don't have that cognitive skill. So instead, we really, really want to try to reframe the don'ts into do's. So instead, how could you reframe the don't hit your brother to what he can do in that moment?
Oh dear. I don't know. Do not. Um,
No, come on. What else could he do with the sword?
um,
Because what he was doing with the sword was not a problem. He was playing. The problem was that he could hurt his baby brother.
okay, so
What
so only play with the sword with Big Bear?
Right. Let's go get Big Bear instead. And then whenever he's connected and regulated, so not in the moment of, why did you do that? Like, and upset, but whenever he's in a playful mood, then you can reiterate, we can only use our sword with stuffed animals or, you know, grandpa. No, kidding.
That's a good one.
Right? And not your baby brother. And it's really important to note the brain, the brain is super, super under construction. So you may have to tell him this over and over and over again. And I have parents say, yeah, but then how do I not become like I'm nagging? And I'm not saying it all in the one same time. I just meant 2 days from now, he may hit brother again with his sword. Then we redirect again, let's go get bear instead, or ask him like, do you remember where we can hit the sword, and be playful. It does, you don't have to come down with don't do that, you're in trouble, because that's just keeping the 3 year old in the downstairs brain. That's not helping him build the connections to the upstairs brain. And for some people this is so new that they have a belief system that you're just being too soft, or you're this isn't actually teaching them. And they probably have that belief system because they were parented in a way that was harsh, but then it didn't allow their brains to fully develop in a healthy way.
So what are some of these generational patterns that we need to be aware of?
I've been mentioning a lot of them is, first of all, the belief system that behavior is something we need to stop or
Okay.
something we need to correct. Uh, Also, the belief system that kids have the skills that they don't have. It's called an expectation gap. There's a huge gap in our expectations for a 3 year old, especially if the 3 year old grandson is highly verbal. It may seem like he has all these skills. He can clearly communicate and clearly let us know how he's feeling. However, we know that the 3 year old brain does not have a lot of these higher level, higher abilities because the frontal lobe is so, so, so underdeveloped. So that's a big generational pattern is what we do with behavior. And we want to shift that to connection. The first 6 years of life, those babies need connection, 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 and play. We can really connect and develop a secure attachment through play because that is their love language or their language and how they communicate and how they make sense of the world. And a lot of adults that's our language too, but a lot of us weren't allowed to play or we got in trouble for playing a certain way. I just took my son to Target. We have a brand new Target right next to our house. And we were checking out the cashier. She looked pretty young, maybe 17, 18. He was using his money to buy some Hot Wheels on Hot Wheel tracks. She said, "Oh, this is awesome. I used to play with these with my brother. It was so much fun." And then she stopped and kind of got sad. Again, we were only in the checkout aisle for 5 minutes, so a lot happened in these 5 minutes. She looked at me and said, "Yeah, but then my mom took it away from us and we were never allowed to play with them again." I asked, "Well, why?" And she said, "Well, because we were launching the cars off of the ramps and we were getting loud and she just didn't like that."
Mm.
What that mom unintentionally did was to communicate to her kids that play is unsafe. Play is not okay. And so I encourage parents to use that as your number one tool for discipline. So with your grandson, you could have taken that moment as especially since he was playing. If he was angry and upset and frustrated and that's why he hit his brother, that's a whole different conversation. But because he was playing, you can then use play because that's how he's making sense of the world. So then we can be like, "Oh, we're going to go play with bear before we can't hit brother. Oh, or why don't we get grandma?" Or like, and you can just speak his language. He was already playing, so match with play. He's going to learn so much better whenever you play than when you tell him what to do or you correct him because he can't really understand that at that age.
Okay, well, that helps me. That really opens up my mind to a lot of things. It really does.
Yeah.
Because
But
obviously,
you have to, that takes a lot of self awareness
Mm.
to tap into what is my relationship with play. Gordon Neufeld, he is the attachment expert. He's done, 40 years of research on attachment. He's in his 70s. I just listened to a podcast he was on. He was talking about how every house that he's lived in, he's had multiple swings because that is the way he stays engaged in playing. He loved swinging as a child, and that was how he regulated. And there's a lot of neuroscience. He didn't talk about this, but there's a lot of neuroscience that goes along with that, with the vestibular input and being able to regulate the brain. Because, there's sensory systems that are very underdeveloped in kids that need to develop. And so, even at, I think he said he's 73, 74 years old, he goes out and swings. And that's his way of connecting to play. And then he's able to play so much better with his grandchildren. So you need to be aware of, okay, does play make me uncomfortable? Can I become a character? Or how else would I play? Playing is reading a book. Playing is baking. It doesn't have to be imaginative play because that tends to be the most uncomfortable for adults. For me, I loved theater, so I love becoming different characters. Even with my 15-year-old, I become like an old lady if I'm trying to get him off of his phone. "Oh, you little boy," and he'll get so annoyed with me. And then just a couple months ago, I was like, "Oh, we gotta get off that phone. Oh no," and becoming like this whole character. He's like, "You're so stupid. This is ridiculous." And then he came out. I stopped. I walked out of his room and he's like, "Can you do that voice again?" So even though it seemed like he was really irritated with me, I could tell being playful versus coming in like, "Get off your freaking phone. I'm done with this." Did you see the difference is we can really become playful and the message will be so much better received.
Okay. So how can faith and personal growth work together in parenting?
For me, it is understanding how God created us. God created us to play, to be in connection. If you look at how Jesus talked about children, "Come to me." I don't know what happened, but we kind of got that all messed up along the way. And even looking back in like the late 1800s and the early 1900s and just child labor. And, it was no longer seeing children as these precious beings and such a gift. So for me, it's understanding how now science is catching up with the Bible and catching up with oh, look at how our emotions are created and hold every thought captive. And it's like, oh, okay, now we're actually understanding and we have the imaging to prove that. And so it's almost we have to go back and, remember our foundations so that, and then also prayer and being really, um, making it a priority to pray for our kids and to understand the power of prayer and then to model. Everything that we do is model, a model, model. Bioenergetics tells us that basically kids are mirrors of us. I really struggle with when my kids are running late or they're not getting enough shoes on. I start to feel that in my body. That's a trigger for me. Then I step back and go, oh, I'm the one who's always late. I'm always wondering where my keys are, where my phone is. And they're just, I can tell them not to be late, but if I'm modeling that behavior. So when it comes to faith, is modeling reading my Bible and talking about scripture or anything that we have rules around or boundaries around, it's all connected to our core values. I think that's really important too.
So I remember one time, it was kind of like my first aha time when the realizing that my kids were growing up. It's like they said, we really need you to give us a little time and let us know what we're doing today. Because it's like, when they're little, you're just like, okay, get on your shoes, we're going here, and that. And there was a point where they like, we need to know where we're going. We need to know ahead of time, and it's kind of like, oh, yeah.
That's amazing they were able to verbalize that because a lot of kids don't verbalize it in that way. Instead, they just have big behaviors and if they feel really chaotic inside. So that is amazing that they were able to communicate that. And I'm working with a mom right now and she has a 4-year old and a 1-year old, two little boys. Same thing. She every day is different. Their routine, there's no really flow or rhythm and it's not only affecting him, but it's really affecting her. And she didn't even realize how much it's affecting her. I have a bunch of printables on my blog. I have ones just for day to day, and then I have one specifically for summer. I really am a big proponent for block scheduling. So even if you can't stick to these times every day, because I definitely can't, I at least know, okay, here are my blocks. I have 5 blocks a day. ChelseaJoe.co. She has amazing resources and she has an awesome podcast called Systemize Your Life. And she's my organizational coach because I really needed help with that. So I have a lot of printables because, like what you're saying, routine is really, really important. Kids need to feel like they know what's coming next. And then that helps, yeah, get them out the door. But I mean, but if I'm not modeling it, I can't expect for them to have skills that I don't have even in my 40s.
So what does the first meeting look like with you?
I do a complimentary coaching call, discovery call, and we just kind of dive into what you're wanting motherhood or fatherhood to look like. I typically work with moms, but then dads join in the program too, and which is super fun. It's way more valuable and you see a lot more transformation in your home if both parents can be on board, but if not, I still work with the individual parents. And so we just kind of talk about what you want your family life to feel like or what struggles you're having with your kids. A lot of people come to me because their kids' behaviors are out of control. And then when we start pulling back the layers, we can see, oh, okay, so it starts with us and in our mindsets about what the behavior is meaning. And so we kind of just dive into that. And then I ask them, like, what happens if you don't start making changes or you don't have this transformation in your parenting? What's going to happen in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years? And then if they decide to work with me, I have a one-on-one program. And the same program is also group coaching, still figuring out how that's going to look. Like I said, I'm pretty brand new as far as that goes. And then they get an online course. So there's videos, there are workbooks. It's a lot of homework and a lot of practice because what we're doing is rewiring the adult's brain so that they can learn how to co-regulate and use their own nervous systems to help their child's nervous system develop. And it takes about 250 some days to recreate a neural connection. I only have them for, I don't know how many days 12 weeks is, but not 200 some days. So we really just practice every week, and then we meet live and work on the breathing techniques and the regulation techniques and figuring out what their thought patterns are and their belief systems are. And so week by week, as they learn more information about, I start them out with just foundations and what it's like to be an empowered parent instead of a power over or power under, like permissive. And then we move into, so it's purpose, P-U-R-P-O.S.E. And so the first P is pausing and presence. And then we practice those week after week after week. And then we have understanding the brain and understanding the whole child. So attachment system, the nervous system. And then we move on to ruptures and repair. We're human. We're going to have ruptures. There is no perfect parent. There's no perfect you, no perfect me. Jesus died on the cross for us, and he was the only one that's perfect. So we understanding that we're going to have ruptures and how important repair is, because a lot of us adults did not get repair from our parents. They just didn't know how to apologize. They didn't know how to ask for forgiveness. And that's, modeling that. And then we move on to optimizing emotional intelligence and emotional regulation. And then setting boundaries. Oh, I forgot play, the other P. We have a whole week on play, and there's lots of opportunities for practice there. And then setting boundaries. A lot of people come to me and they want to get right to setting boundaries. We have to get through all these other, really work on belief systems and thoughts and how we feel in our bodies before we can get into the discipline. And so how to set boundaries from values, and also understanding motivation and how to motivate another human. That week has actually got split into two parts because I couldn't just go right into setting boundaries. We need to really understand intrinsic motivation, extrinsic motivation, and then we go into empowering growth and integrating everything that they learn. So I know you had asked what the first meeting's like, but that's basically first meeting, and then we jump right in and we go on this really beautiful journey.
Oh, it sounds wonderful. All right, Giant Builders. So I will have all of her links below. So make sure you look at those. Make sure also that you visit our social media and leave a comment, because that helps us reach more people. And then up here or over here, I'm not sure which way it shows up, but somewhere in this area, you'll have links to other podcasts that we've done that are family related. So please take a look at those. Well, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, be mindful of your thoughts and where you feel in your body and your emotions. Those three pieces are huge. And going from a place of reacting to responding, and then reminding yourself that it really matters, because then we can raise kids who get what they need and their frontal lobes are able to fully develop, and they can make much better choices in their 20s and 30s and 40s, and have healthy relationships and all the things that we want for our kids. It really starts with you as a parent. It starts with me as a parent. And the more I've done this work, I mean, I've been doing this work for, probably 8, 9 years. I have become basically my own little coach. Whenever I start to feel it in my body, I'm super aware. If I'm aware of, but I want to feel upset right now, I'm aware of how much better it feels to regulate. And if I am upset, it's only going to keep my kids in a dysregulated state, and it's not going to help anyone. And the only reason why I want to feel upset is because my brain has been living in that for so long. And so I just start to become, once you start working on these things, just little baby steps. For this week, just work on where you feel it in your body. Whenever your kid is screaming or having a tantrum or hits the little brother, where do you feel it in your body? And just put your hands on that part of your body and just tell yourself, I'm safe. So it just starts there. And then you can move into the emotions, and then move into what your thoughts are. And then you eventually start becoming your own little coach in those moments, so that you can show up in a way that's going to help your child versus honestly, we unintentionally cause trauma in the brain because we don't have this understanding.
Great, great ending. All right, giant builders, we'll see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. This was great.
Thank you for listening. This has been The Giant Builders with Lois Wyant.